Don't compare your child to another person's child. Don't compare your child to your firstborn. I want to quickly touch on neurodiversity and assessments. How many minutes a day would you recommend that parents spend on home learning or home strategies? Homeschooling, and I'm just going to keep it short. I really wanted to divulge to this, but next time. Homeschooling. Over 55% of parents in the UK believe that the current curriculum does not prepare children for the real world, with common concerns being the lack of financial literacy, life and skills. And this was from a survey by Pearson's in 2019. I'm really, really happy today that I have this amazing teacher who I actually came across on TikTok, where her live was so interactive and parents were asking questions and Jade was answering in such an eloquent but helpful manner. And I was just like, this woman is amazing. And one thing that drew me to you was, again, you empower parents. So it's not just about answering them, but you also ask reflective questions on what's going on in the home. How can you be better? What's going on for your child? Don't compare your child to another person's child. Don't compare your child to your firstborn. If this is the presentation that you can see, okay, where do we go from there? Yeah. So Jade is a primary school teacher, a tutor with a passion to empower parents to support their children's needs in education. She runs a very interactive online presence. But Jade, I want you to tell us more about you.
Yeah, well, I guess, like you already said, my online presence has been growing up because I'm a primary school teacher. I also do a lot of private tutoring, and I think that was what fueled my passion, working with the parents in the schools and seeing how they need support, but I as one teacher cannot give that level of support that's needed for all of the children. When I got into private tutoring, I was able to do, the children I worked with were able to do much better because I was in the home one-on-one working with the parents, but not just my part that I played, explaining to them the role that they need to play. And I think that is what is kind of missing in schools, that I was able to do in tutoring that I couldn't really do as a teacher. So that's where my business came from, just trying to reach as many parents as possible to teach them what is needed, to give them the tools, run workshops to empower them, like you said, to be able to do it themselves rather than just bringing someone or asking someone the solution to the problem, because maybe I can solve that one problem for you in that moment. But when the next problem arises, are you prepared? What can you do to deal with it? So that's what I try and do, empower parents to be able to solve these issues themselves.
And sometimes that issue is just one of many, as you said, but is a cause and effect, as you know. Yeah. So one issue can be presented in a larger way, but meanwhile there are other things that are in the closet, in the background, and that issue is just a projected identification that's just exploded. Yeah. So it's quite interesting. But there's something that you said that is so profound that it's not only about the teaching. You go into homes and you enable and you empower parents in, I wouldn't really say being there, but being aware of certain strategies that they can use. Yeah. So can you give me a real life example of that without obviously revealing the children's identity?
Of course. I would say, like, I'll go in for tutoring them in a specific subject. In every home that I've gone into, I've realised that there's something deeper with the child as to why it's not just, but hardly ever is it just that they are struggling like academically. Okay, yeah. So a lot of the time I'll go in for the academic support, but then I'll realise that the way the communication between the child and parent is unhealthy. So when the parent is trying to get the child to do their work or to listen, etc., the way that the parent is communicating that to the child, it's not the way that your child needs to receive it. Some parents, again, they have multiple children. It worked with this child, so they'll try the same thing. Okay. And then it's just about, so what I will do, what I have done in some homes is taught the parents to look at their child as an individual, not just, a projection of themselves or at all comparing them to the other sibling. Well, I used to do this with this child and it worked. Okay, this child is different. So you need to meet your child at where they are. So that's what I will do with parents, and I'll give them strategies, and a lot of my strategies with them won't be, okay, this is how to teach them how to count, or this is how to get them to have neat handwriting. Instilling in them, getting your child to understand why you want this from them. A lot of the time, what I've noticed with the parents who want their children to do better, they don't actually explain why. So it's just like you need to do this. And because the child is not really understanding where the parent's coming from, there's a resistance.
Yeah.
So it's about breaking that down, and I will get the parent to understand that you're not helping your child. One of this particular children that I have, his confidence levels are extremely low. He's very capable, but he's resistant to trying because in school he has some struggles and he's always getting things wrong. So now when he comes home, he doesn't want to even try because he's embarrassed that he's going to get things wrong. So I wouldn't make a big deal when he made a mistake, or I started him with much, much easier work so that he could see himself being successful.
Yes.
Even though the work is not even at his level, it's very easy work. But from when he could see, oh, I'm doing well, when I would then give him something a little bit harder, I'm like, okay, now try this.
Yeah.
He's willing to because he's seen, okay, I could do that, so let me have a go.
Yeah.
But if the parents are just putting in front of the child something that they struggle with, there's going to be that resistance, that reluctance to take part. So with his parents, we spoke about giving him stuff that he's going to be able to do so that you can build his confidence rather than just more of the same difficult stuff.
Yeah.
It was a confidence thing with him. And now that barrier has been broken down and he is more confident, he will do for them the harder stuff and he'll have a go because they've instilled in him that ability.
That you can do it.
Yeah, that he can do it. And that resilience, that even if he does get it wrong, it's okay. Whereas before, he felt, a lot of pressure and embarrassment around being wrong. So that was one example where we've completely changed his attitude towards his learning, but it wasn't to do with his academics, it was to do with his self-esteem.
That now affected his academics.
Exactly.
But I think this is a prime example of early intervention. Sometimes when parents hear early intervention, sometimes they think it's tubes going down their child's throats or 10 different professionals coming in and out. But it's actually the simple things that we take for granted.
Yeah.
That was the strategy that helped that child know that I can win.
Yeah.
And also his parents also know that it's a gradual process.
Yeah,
it's a gradual process. And I bet those parents now can see the difference between their child when he can do something willingly and when he's actually finding it so difficult.
Exactly.
And I always say that sometimes as adults, especially when it comes to education, sometimes we can be quite harsh on our children because we see them, as you said, as a reflection of ourselves, where we want them to achieve. And achievement is associated with education when you are in this side of the world. And when you're in primary school age, that's the quickest way to achieve is to be academically able.
Exactly.
So, connecting the two and then having a child that can't do that and there's something in you that wants your child to do it, it can be frustrating. But sometimes parents can lose sight of their child in it.
Yeah.
So I think that is the early intervention that is a great example of is a gradual process. How long did that take, if you can remember?
I would say a few months.
Okay, see, it is gradual.
Yeah, so in the first, he's very, very shy, very quiet. Now he's like much more comfortable to speak and to have a go. A lot before he would need a lot of prompting, or when he would answer a question, rather than saying the answer with confidence, he would say like, I think, or is it this? It was just, you could tell that he was always, even when he was right, it was still like a, is it, or like he didn't want to admit that this is the answer I'm giving. It was always like, I think it might be this, but I think I'm wrong. Like he started with that. So although he was saying the answer, it was still like, oh, I'm ready to be told that I'm wrong, kind of thing. But now we're at the point where he will just give an answer. He still makes mistakes, but there's a lot less shame.
Exactly, because you're learning.
Exactly that, but there's a lot less shame now around it, and his parents also are comfortable with not worrying about those perfect scores, and they're much more comfortable, with him when he makes mistakes. We need to help him rather than feel frustrated at him or give him more.
Because now they see the zeal, they see the zeal, and I guess they see what their money's doing. I guess as a tutor, they see what the money's doing, and I think that's important. Because I think there are parents who want to invest in their child's education and their child's lives, which comes from a good place. It doesn't come from it comes from a good place. Yeah. Sometimes it does come from I don't want to say selfish place, but it comes from what's going on with them. Yeah. But sometimes that necessarily doesn't mean it's bad. But also how they approach what they invest in is quite important. Giving it time, actually allowing the person that they've partnered with to help them reflect.
Exactly.
Being open to learn as well, because sometimes they focus on their child's learning, and then so you actually need to learn as well.
Yeah,
but I guess you're doing the both.
I've had a few situations where I've felt like it's not working because the parents are not trying to be involved. It's kind of like, we're paying you to do this, you do this. But because it's so much more of the child, me being there for 1 hour a week is not going to fix the issues that we see here, and it requires effort from them. I'll still work with the child, but the progress is not going to be as effective. We're not going to see as much progress as I would hope for until the parents, get more involved.
So what you're saying is that, would I say that what you're saying is that home tutoring, parents should be involved, and in school as well, parents should be involved, because it makes a difference. So there is actually a significant difference between children who their parents are actually involved in their learning, and ones that are just like, okay, you go to the after school club, it's called different things in different schools, and I get you a 1 hour tutor, you're on BBC Bite Size, and I'm facilitating that, you do it, it's totally different.
Of course, and even especially with the children who are finding education difficult, if their parents don't have a good relationship with the teachers, with the school, some parents have like their own traumas around education,
We're
and
gonna
therefore
get there.
will not even want to take part with their child. But if that's what you're showing to your child, then how do you expect them to have that passion for it if they can see that you're like against it almost?
The modelling, because I actually see parents at times, it can be for different reasons, where the education system represents something to them, represents something negative to them that they want to rebel against. And they become so hyper-focused on that their child gets lost in mind, their child's education gets lost in mind. So the conflicts with school, not saying the other side as well don't have a part, but sometimes there's a difference between a parent wanted to communicate with a school and is not happy with what's going on, or sometimes the education system represents an authority that they are finding uneasy to bear, and their children pay for it. So my next question is, what would you advise parents who are finding it hard to communicate with school, that are realising there is a conflict?
Okay, so this is a big question, because this is something that I deal with all the time. I personally have not had these issues. I always say, like, I've been very lucky, I suppose, dealing with parents, I've found it easy. But I think that the child's interest, what is best for the child, needs to remain the topic. And everything that we discuss, every action that the parent takes, the teacher takes,
the child,
it needs to be, remember why we're having this conversation in the first place. Because it can be, parents can feel attacked. Teachers can also feel attacked. Schools feel attacked. So everyone's now just becoming defensive and responding from a place of defense. Whereas what we need to do is forget how you feel, forget your ego and your personal feelings towards the situation. What would be the best outcome for the child? How can we help the child to make progress or improve their situation? It's not always academic. Sometimes it's their behaviour, their mental health, etc. What can we do to improve their situation? And every single step that is taken, every word that is spoken should come back to that. And if it's anything other than that, then we just need to, leave it.
We need to go back to the drawing board or leave it. And I think sometimes that's where school staff feel like, well, it's not working. And that's where things like managed moves come in, and people referral units come in, where, okay, yes, it's about behaviour, it's about learning, but it's actually not working with the parent. So before it gets to that point, what are the steps? The schools, every school has different systems. Some schools log in things, some schools call in for meetings, but what are the steps when there is a concern about behaviour, about learning?
So like you said, every school has their differences, but what we advise is that, you start with an initial conversation with the relevant person. I would advise that you speak to the teacher directly if it's possible, because some people will go straight to like the head teacher. I've had one parent who did just that went straight to senior leadership, and it was a small issue, but because of how she felt, she wanted to make sure that, you know, like your supervisors know about this issue. And that's not a good way to start off, because then, you know, you have all these issues. I don't mind, I don't take anything personal. So it was told to me, and then I spoke to the parent, and it was resolved. But I would always advise going to the teacher first.
Okay.
If you've spoken to the teacher, you feel like things are not progressing, I would then put it in an email, because I always say you want to keep a record, because if you then raise the issue and take it a little bit further, maybe speak to like the deputy or the head teacher, or if it's not being dealt at that level, you might want to take it to like the local authority or Ofsted or somebody higher, but you want to have a record that you've taken these steps beforehand. If you're just speaking to people at the school gates all the time, the school, it's quite easy for the school to say, oh, we didn't really know, you know, we haven't really come across, haven't dealt with this. And I've had parents say, oh, I've spoke to the teacher 6-7 times. I wouldn't advise speaking to the teacher 6-7
Yeah, because there's no
times.
record.
Exactly. If you've spoken to the teacher once, you might follow up. So that's 2 conversations you've had. If after that you're still not happy, I would get an email, requesting a meeting in email, via email, and then when you have that formal meeting, ask for everyone who's involved, whether it be the TA, the class teacher, the Senko, anyone that's relevant to your child's experience in that school. I would ask for them to be present, which it might be difficult to work out timings, but it is possible as long as you know, give some notice and things like that. Some parents will say like they've experienced that, oh, the teacher was busy, or this person couldn't come because they had a meeting, or I would wait. I would make sure that, you know, this, if I want this to get dealt with properly, then I'll wait and be patient to an extent, of course, not just waiting forever. But yeah, definitely getting things in emails and requesting formal meetings, because we get spoken to, and from the teacher perspective, I get spoken to about things every single day by about 10, 11 different parents in the morning, and then 15 parents in the afternoon. So if that's happening every single day, 1, it's hard to remember everything that you've been told, and 2, sometimes when you go back to the parent, they'll be like, oh yeah, no, it's fine now, because it's just a short thing that they just wanted to get off their chest.
Excel,
Exactly, and then now it's not an issue. So if you request a meeting, that kind of shows the severity of how you feel about the situation. So that's what I always say to parents: have that conversation. If things don't improve, request a meeting, because that way you have a record of this is something that I wanted to take serious and discuss. And then you can, in the meeting, you can get actions and next steps.
I was just about to ask that.
Down.
Should parents always have next steps?
Definitely.
Should they always leave meetings?
For sure.
Next steps.
You know, some children will have actual plans that have already been laid out for them, but some children don't. I would be requesting the next steps, and then I would ask, can you email me the next steps? So that way I've got them, but you've also, you know, we both approved of this, and it's here written for us to see. So now if these next steps are not being followed, that's something that you can follow up on, but you've got it written down, and it's something that's been agreed to, as opposed to just, oh yeah, what we'll do is this, and then it doesn't get followed up.
And that should include a time frame for some of them, shouldn't it? So the next 3 months.
For sure. Time frame is important. Yeah, based on whatever the next steps are.
And I also think as well that parents should be open as well, because some of those points and time frames might be things that you need to go home and work with your child with, or your family with, you know, making the home conducive for that improvement, for that step. For some families it could be screen time, for some families it could be bedtime, for some families it could be even dinner time. Maybe a child is having issues at lunchtime, you know, sometimes practical steps. Maybe a child is having difficulty at lunch, and then after that, that's it, the next 2 lessons the child is dysregulated. Small things like working at home with dinner time, getting that child involved. Again, I think as professionals and families, we take the small things for granted.
For sure.
And what I've seen is, and I think we all do it in different areas of our lives, where when there is a problem inwards, we project it out. So it's always external. And unfortunately for teachers, the next place for young people is school. So it's the school, it's the teacher. Because sometimes as teachers, you represent a maternal figure, a paternal figure for that child, and even sometimes the parent. At times, you represent something. So when they're feeling unheard, then they treat you the same way, or they feel the same way they would feel if a maternal figure was ignoring them which is it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not as easy to deal with.
No.
Yeah, and online as well, you get like parents who are hurt about the teachers in their child's school, but will bring that anger to you. And
Yes,
I'm always
project
trying
it.
to tell people I don't even work at your child's
see you
school.
and see you as a representation of that.
All teachers. You are a teacher, and what teachers are is this, and this, because I had this experience.
Yeah.
And they're unable to separate. No two teachers are going to be the same.
Yeah.
I don't even work at your child's school, let alone know your situation. And that's something that I've found a lot, especially online.
So how do parents separate? Because I think it's an ongoing, for me at the Parent Advice Hub, is an ongoing statement that I use in a lot of the work that I do with parents is, yes, your child is associated with you. Yes, you gave birth to that child. Yes, you have stewardship over that child, but the child is not you.
Yeah.
The child is not, it's not you, it's a separate entity. And again, in education, we see all the time where a child's progress in school is relayed, the parent sees it as a representation of them, not even in a way of, oh, I need to do more work, it's me.
Yeah.
You're embarrassing me. When a child does well, it's I'm doing well.
Yeah.
When there's a friendship breakup in school, conflict is, it's me. So how do parents get to the point where they can empower their children in education and see their child as separate?
Oh.
Yeah, how? Because we say this over and over again, but how? I just think it's the knowledge of it. I'm answering my own question.
Yeah, I think that it's just like you said, like knowing that your child is like letting go, because of course when you're pregnant, before you have your children, whether you're adopting or whatever it may be, you know what you want for your children, and then your child comes into the world and either they are what you wanted for them or they're not.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time children are going to fall short of your expectations because your expectations are high and they don't take into consideration the factors or like it's not your child is not concerned for what you hopes you had for them. They have their own feelings, even generationally things will change and be different. What you see as successful, like going to uni, getting a degree, getting a job, if we look at the generations now, how many of them are going to view that as the ultimate goal? They might see it as that's a financial burden or a waste of time when I can go on social media and make money in a few months or something like that. So yeah, just understanding that you have to want, happiness and success for your child, but you also need to, whilst guiding them, of course, because children don't really know what they want.
Yeah, so you have to be an advocate.
Yeah, so you have to definitely support them and make sure it's safe and, sensible, whatever that word means, but knowing that you also need to let your child have a voice in terms of where their life is going, what direction they're following.
Is your child having a voice in education always leading them and supporting them in the things they find easy and they like, or sometimes kind of supporting them and pushing them in the things they find difficult, like maths?
I think if you're going to send your child to school, there has to be an understanding that the system requires certain things of them.
Yes.
So whether or not your child likes it, if you're sending your child to school, whether they like it is not the most useful way to look at their academic progress.
Or whether you like it or you find it useful.
Of course, exactly. They're going to school. These are the subjects that they're going to study, and your best bet is to give them opportunity to excel at all of them. Yeah. But if there's certain subjects they don't like, you don't have to push it, but having that understanding that this is what they're going to be studying. So if there's a subject that you're kind of like, oh, I don't really value that, they're studying it. So at least give them an opportunity to enjoy it and choose for themselves, because you don't know that thing that you're not interested in might be the thing that your child is extremely talented in. And
will find useful.
Exactly.
I think there is this thing, just going back to the statistic I read, there is this thing about and sometimes I do get a bit annoyed when adults say it, where what children learn in school or what we learn in school isn't useful. We should be teaching children, I don't even want to name things, it doesn't look like I'm trolling. We should be teaching children this, teaching children that. And I just look at them and think, okay, what's next? I mean, I'm not saying it's the best curriculum, but I think a lot of it is functional skills. I think again we take for granted the things literacy, fractions, elements.
Yeah, definitely think the core, the foundational subjects are useful. And I always say, like, even if you're home educating, I would highly recommend that you formally, you do some formal education when it comes to the maths and English skills that they are going to need in life, that they will need. Like after primary education, it's hit and miss with what they study in secondary school. But in terms of their primary education, I think for me, as a tutor, I don't base it on their age. I think that's where school it is a bit difficult.
It's a bit difficult. I think we're one of the only countries that do that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that is very difficult because you can have a child in year 6 who needs to be on the year 2 maths curriculum. Yeah. And they didn't secure it at year 2. They then moved on to year 3, secured nothing, 4, nothing. Yeah. Now they're in year 6 and they're pushed, and they're trying to use these
depending on what local authority they live in, they just get pushed until it's someone else's
so
issue.
That's what I would say is a difficult thing. As a tutor, I do not look at that. I will assess a child when I initially get them against their year group standards. Okay. And from that assessment, I will gauge, okay, they're a little bit below or they're extremely below. One of the boys that I tutor, he was in year 2, I was teaching him year 4 maths because he was capable.
He's capable.
I'm not going to continue with year 2, what's the point?
Yeah, but the thing is about it is those children have the liberty of a tutor. So now I think where a lot of parents are a bit concerned is on both sides, where their child needs more support or the child needs to be doing more than what they're doing. They're in a class of, what's the average now, 30? Yeah, 30. They're in a class of 30 and, if they were homeschooled or if I had the capacity to homeschool my child would be doing work 2 years advanced. So what would you say to those parents?
I think if you're going to send your child to school, I don't advise pushing your child too far ahead. Okay. In terms of if they are advanced, I don't advise going years and years above.
Why?
Because when they're going to be in school, they're going to be held back. Yeah. And they're going to there will be a few hours a day, like if they've got maths and English or whatever subject it may be, they're now going to be sat there bored, or they're going to become the teacher's helper, or they're going to become the helper of the other student.
And that's an opening to something else.
Yeah, and then that's where a lot of behaviour issues come in. There's been a lot of children who behavioural issues is as a result of the work's boring, the work's too easy for them. So I don't advise you to go to an extreme that like your child's in year 2 and you got them doing year 6 maths. I just don't advise it because what's the point now of them continuing with school? It is one of the beauties of home education. You can do the whole curriculum in 4 years if your child can do it. But I would say maintaining that level, like deepening their thinking, their critical thinking skills. So if they're in year 4 or 5 and they're secure with their maths and English, deepen it. At their level, go deeper, because one thing that school can't always do is go very, very deep, because we've got children on extremely low levels. So we're teaching the foundational basic skills. You can take those foundational skills and put them into problems, word problems that have 12 different answers, 12 different routes of getting to the answer, cracking the code, things like that really, really get them critically thinking and problem solving. So when they go out into the real world, they can apply what they've learned in school to real life situations.
So where do parents get those resources from? Because I think the easiest thing is if you see your child is doing better than their average age, is to get the next level up of the book, of the textbook. The textbook that's got their head on it with different colours. But where would a parent get the resources to help their child still stay at their maintenance level, but cracking deeper, as you're saying?
So there are quite a few different apps that parents can use. So, and different websites that parents can access it. Some of them are free, some of them are subscriptions. There are some out there, but what I've found extremely useful is AI, ChatGPT. Yeah. I've found it so useful, especially as a tutor. I have a couple of children who they're at their level, but they're quite high at their level. So you can just ask ChatGPT, okay, you can literally explain your child's situation and ask for, I need some word problems that involve fractions, this and this, and I need it to have 7 possible answers, or I need there to be, sometimes what I would do as well with children is give them problems that are impossible to solve and that have a mistake, to get that child thinking, oh, this can't be solved.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time children are used to there's one right answer here.
Yeah, there's one right answer. Yeah, there's one right answer.
So
This
yeah,
is
that's
the way you
another
answer
thing.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Like sometimes getting them to problem solve to get to the solution that there's no solution.
Okay.
Things
So
like
like
that.
a practical step is like sometimes when you're in school and you learn long division in a certain way, you learn to carry the one in a certain way.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is that you can teach your children other strategies.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Or other methods. Let's say maths is other methods.
And you can do like missing numbers, for example, or you can give them the answer and say to them, one thing that we use is, this is a game that some teachers might play, that this is the answer, what's the question?
Okay.
That has 500 different possibilities. Yeah.
Really
and
think.
then you could say to them, this is the answer, the question has to be multiplication. So what is the question?
Okay.
And again, limitless. They can, if the answer is 10, they could tell you the question was 5 times 2. They could tell you it's 10 times 1.
Yeah.
You know, they can tell you all these different options.
Yeah.
And it's just about that. I think that is the part that school can't really do.
Because they don't have the capacity.
Exactly.
And the funny thing is about this strategy that you're suggesting is that child most likely will be somebody in a few years' time when it's appropriate to teach them about money management and stocks and shares and savings. They'll be able to pick it up.
Yeah.
They will be able to pick it up.
Yeah.
Because they've problem solved, because they've been able to see different methods of how to, you know, divide this and times this.
Yeah.
Or it's, like they will be able to problem solve. And I think that's the thing sometimes that we take for granted. A question that I have for you is, how many minutes a day would you recommend that parents spend on home learning or home strategies to do with maintaining their child's educational age or even improving it?
I would say it depends on the child, definitely, because obviously there are some children who their attention span is much shorter. They're not going to engage.
Yeah.
So
and you have to be honest.
Yeah.
Have mercy on the child.
And sometimes, you know, I've said to some parents who I've worked with, I've said, do 10 minutes with your child.
Yeah.
Because I would rather 10 minutes of focused learning than you trying to force an hour out of them.
And that's 2 questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Trying to force an hour out of them, and for the other 50 minutes, they weren't paying attention anyway. So I would average it around half an hour. I wouldn't go past half an hour, parent and child, because even us in school as teachers, we have like 10, 15 minutes of teacher input. Then we have time where the children are doing partner work, and then their independent activities about 20 minutes. So where you look at a 1 hour long maths lesson, it's not 1 hour of your child doing work for the whole hour. And when I tutor, I don't spend the whole hour. I will have conversation with the child. We'll play like maybe some like little activities and games and things to get their brain ticking. We'll have little breaks where it will still be related to learning, but it won't be formal. Right, you're completing worksheets. Some parents will give their child their workbook and say, okay, you're going to do the workbook for an hour. And you have to
look at the
yourself,
back and then mark it, look at the back for the...
You have to ask yourself, what is your child, how much is your child getting out of that? Because, like I said, I would say roughly half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour per subject. Like if your child is like quite good at maths, then you might not even need to do it every day. Okay. There are some children who, because of how advanced they are, them doing it every day, it wouldn't be useful. Yeah,
they can use that time to have private reading time.
Exactly, something else.
So I think it's means testing, but I think what it is, I think the point I want to raise to that is that parents have to be honest, you know, and really think about that child. Yeah. You know, if the child is doing well in maths, and allow them to do other subjects. If they're not doing well in maths and you're seeing they're distressed while doing maths, find a way to work with that child so that the maths is still being done. We're focusing on maths so much because maths is something that I struggled with.
Yeah, maths is massive, and like you said, you struggled with it. I have friends who are parents who struggled with maths, so they're like, they don't even touch it.
Yeah, but I got my grade.
That's reproducing the cycle. Myself as well, like I struggled with it. It upset me.
You had to put in a lot of work.
You had to put in a lot of work, and then sometimes you just think if it was like broken down or made a little bit fun, or you know, done in a different way. Like for example, I have one boy that I tutor who's now homeschooled because he wasn't
full time.
He wasn't. His school environment, he was somebody who was like 3-4 years behind academically. Therefore, the gap was getting bigger. The older he got in school, his parents just took him out.
Okay.
And when I do maths with him now, we use a dice all the time. We'll roll the dice, we'll add the numbers. Roll 2 dice, and we're adding the numbers that come up on the dice. So he's doing addition.
And that's age appropriate
exactly.
for him.
Yeah, he's doing addition, but he doesn't feel like he's doing addition. Whereas if I ask him, what's 5 plus 6, just do it on paper, he's going to get bored and not feel so interested. But he's doing the same thing. We just make it into something that's a bit more fun.
That's interesting.
And we spend 5 minutes at the start doing a game like that just to ease him in. And now he's spent 5 minutes doing sums that if, certain parents might just write out 20 questions for their child, answer these questions. It could be the same. They may do it, but
it's that punishment,
dragging
isn't
them
it?
through that.
Yeah,
exactly.
For some children, it might not be punishment. For some
If
children, they need to feel contained in that manner where this is schoolwork. I'm going to focus on the schoolwork.
Exactly,
Don't give me any dice. But for some,
it just doesn't work.
It's a lot. So, what would you say for parents to look out for when it comes to difficulty? When it comes to difficulty in education, what are some 3 signs that your child is finding school education-wise difficult? Is that too wide?
No, not really. No. So I would say like behaviour at home.
Okay.
Because sometimes when a kid is stressed and struggling all day at school,
home is where they
come home.
Yeah.
And the parents get it, and a lot of parents will say that, I don't know why my child is an angel at school. The teachers are always saying they're so well behaved, but at home they're the opposite.
Yeah.
It is potentially that all day they're containing it because they're struggling, so they've spent all day trying their hardest, using every inch of their brain to focus and access. Yeah. So if they're struggling with behaviour at home, it could be, not always, but it could be that they're struggling in school and suppressing their struggles.
And they're just getting, those children that they're just getting by.
Exactly.
So they're getting the 3s, they're getting the 4s, or what is it in primary school?
So in primary school there's expected, greater depth, which is above, and working below.
Okay.
So some schools will call it working towards.
Okay.
Some schools will call it working below. They mean the same thing.
Okay.
And then expected is obviously exactly where they should be.
Okay.
Greater depth is anyone who's above where they should be. But there are some children that are like just working at expected, but it's a mental strain for them to be at expected. So that's something that I would always say, like behaviour at home. Also, if they're quiet, if they're like if a teacher's reporting that a child is quite quiet, that is like a sign that maybe they're trying to go unnoticed because they don't understand. There's not so, I don't find it that much now, but I have had previous classes where children, rather than asking for help, will just try and be so quiet in the corner so that it looks like they know what's going on, and so they're not getting noticed. So if your child is, being spoken about as they're shy, they're quiet, but they're not like that at home, you might then wonder, okay, why are they like that in school? What's going on? And also, I would just say, for a parent to really understand, there are questions that you can ask. Okay. Is there anything my child is struggling with at school? What areas do I need to help my child with at home? Those are questions that I always encourage parents to ask, because sometimes what I've heard parents say is that their school report is coming back that they're below, but when I ask the teacher, how are they doing? The teacher says, fine. And I always say, that's not a specific enough question, because you're asking how they're doing. The teacher's so busy, you might be asking that after school at the end of the day. I'm just going to say, yeah, fine, because it's quick and easy. But if you start asking questions like, what areas is my child struggling with, you'll get the teacher can't give you a one-word answer.
Yeah, it's true.
They're forced to, okay, they're actually asking me. And unless if the teacher says nothing, then why is the report showing that the child is below? So I always encourage parents, you need to be proactive. You might not always it might be when you get your child's report that you find out that your child is struggling, because they're not struggling so badly that we need to say something. That is disruptive. Exactly. But it might just be there's little areas for them that if parents were to ask, they'd find out about and then could support it at home.
And sometimes, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, sometimes it's actually dependent on the school and the class, which is why sometimes a child that's in like table 6 in primary school can be in group 4 in secondary school, because it's actually about the average of that class and how fast or how slow that class is moving.
Exactly, and it works the other way as well. Like, I've had children who seemingly in this class are super, super smart, but you're in a class of children who barely speak English. We have a lot of SEN here, and that child is, and then the parent will wonder why their child is expected and not great at depth. And then I'll explain, we're not judging your child against the other children. So yes, they're more advanced, but in comparison to, you know, we're not comparing them to what's in the class. Like you said, it can work the other way. Your child might be at the bottom end of the class, but we might have a class full of children who are high attainers.
So interesting.
And it's so important to not compare. Even within the home, within your 2 children, I've spoken to parents of twins, and I've said to them, you know, not to compare entities at all. Where you're, well, this child will sit and do this, but the other one refuses, or this one does this, and, you know, every single child is different. So to compare your child to a child who comes from a different family, a different background, you do not know what is going on in that home as to why the child is successful. You don't know what pressures are being applied on them, you know.
Or what work has been put in at home that you may not be doing. Or you may not have the capacity to do at that time, or the knowledge. There
are so many factors. So comparing your child to another child is just the worst thing you can ever do.
I want to quickly touch on neurodiversity and assessments. From a teacher's perspective, because I have my own perspective and insight, is we know there's waiting lists. We know local authority waiting lists. We know that even some local authority schools don't even assess children anymore. Where it has to be privately done. But I think there is a perception from the different communities that maybe, you know, children are pinpointed and identified as having, you know, autism or ADHD or dyslexia, and it's an attack. Or it's a label that's been put, but without knowing that in this time where there are waiting lists, where they say there is no money for assessments and interventions, where if at this time your child has been spotted at primary school age, that means there is a concern, and there might have been a concern for more than 6 months. I don't know if I'm just speaking from my insight.
I would definitely say, we're not. There's because the process is so difficult for a child to be diagnosed, to get an EHCP, etc. We wouldn't bring that hassle on ourselves of labeling your child. First of all, I would always say, what are we going to get out of that? Sometimes they say, oh, schools get funding, so that's why they want to label your child.
For your child,
exactly.
Not for the school.
To label the child for the funding. But it's not as if we say, okay, this child's autistic, next week there's a transfer. No, it's not like that at all. And the schools have to prove it. There has to be references written. I've done assessments before of where I have to tick these boxes to say yes or no.
Schools have to make their own learning plan sometimes. Sometimes children don't even get the educational learning plan. The school have to create one.
That's definitely a thing that we have to do, and we have to then answer to this child's needs. And once that child has an EHCP, a lot of children...
What is an EHCP for people who don't know?
So we've got educational healthcare plan, and that comes from the local authority.
To say that this child
has these needs and needs these things. So once that is given to the child, that puts more pressure on the school. Because now the local authority is checking, and then you'll have reviews, you'll have meetings to check, has this child made the progress that we've expected? So a school, well, I speak from myself as a teacher, actually. I can't speak for a whole school. But myself as a teacher, I wouldn't refer or mention a child needs that I believe that they have if I didn't really believe that they had those needs.
Especially at a primary school age as well.
Yeah, definitely, because it's more hassle for me. To have a child of SEN in my class is hassle, because you now have to meet their needs, you have to have meetings with their parents, you have to tailor the work. And
you have to accommodate another staff member sometimes.
Exactly, and now we have to adapt the whole environment for them. So it's not fun, it's not something that you would want to do. So, but we do it because we care, and we realise that this child needs different type of learning, so we're gonna push for it for them. So if it would make my life easier if I didn't have any SEN children in my class, I wouldn't force that.
Yeah.
Unless
And
I
how
think it's there.
important is it? Because sometimes children go for assessments and they don't get an EHCP plan. What they get is a referral to a parenting practitioner for incredible years, or maybe some local authorities extra funded for a tutor. But in the cases where there is a diagnosis, what is the next steps for those parents? What would you recommend them to do once it has come through where, according to these tests and these observations and the teacher's perspective and what you see at home, what would be the next step?
I would recommend that they do their research on what options are out there to support their child, and then understand that even within the diagnosis is so broad. So getting to know your child specifically, as opposed to, oh, my child's autistic, therefore I'm going to try this and this, because that's what
Minecraft
is for exactly what is for autistic children. Oh, now I must get them an iPad because autistic children need screen time. Some children, they are able to regulate with that, but I always say, before we had screens, there were autistic children, and there are other ways. So it's a quick way because it's there at all times, but there are other ways. So I truly believe in having a multitude of ways to help your child, but also really getting to know them and not just doing what's easy. But
true.
Obviously it can be stressful having a child with high support needs and you're tired and worn out. You want a break. I do also understand that side of things. So, but then we need to be honest about, is this for the child or is this for me? And it's fine if you're doing some things for you. Like if you give your child the iPad for 10 minutes because you want silence for 10 minutes. I'm not against that because I do understand that if a child is screaming, throwing things and banging their head against the wall 24/7,
because they need to regulate,
then I understand that you're stressed and you might take it out on them. So if you give them iPad for 10 minutes so you can regulate,
both of you.
Exactly, and then you can deal with them better. I'm not against that, but definitely it's important to understand, who are we doing this for, the child or for yourself?
Great
and
point.
having like things in place so that when it does get to that difficult time, you're not now last minute scrounging for a solution. You're coming prepared, and that's what I think they should do, and work with the school.
Use I was just about to say that. Use the community. Use the teachers. Use the school. Use what's around. It's really important.
And I think never feel embarrassed to ask questions, because a lot of parents do feel like, oh, I should know this. This is embarrassing. I don't know.
But sometimes we don't.
You don't. Even myself as a teacher, when I first started out, I was forever in my supervisor's office asking him questions that
because he's more experienced.
Exactly. I should probably know this, but I don't.
But
so
it's case by case. Sometimes you will know it in one student, but in this student you don't.
The alternative is I stay here not knowing, and who's that helping?
Nobody.
So I just need to, so I would just have to come out. And you do have to get over that awkwardness sometimes of like, oh, this is a bit embarrassing to ask this question. But especially for parents, you can't stay struggling because it's literally your child's life. And if you don't know the answer to something, it's your job to go and find it.
It's your job to go and find out.
Exactly.
You may not be the cause, but it's your responsibility.
Yeah, for sure.
One last question. I have to answer this question because homeschooling, and I'm just going to keep it short. I really wanted to divulge to this, but next time, homeschooling. What are the properties, I would say, that gives parents the capacity to sign that paper and to take their child out of school and say, I am now homeschooling? I know the remits. I'm very, very knowledgeable about the remits where you don't have to teach your children anything. Everyone has a right, but there's actually also an act of every child has the right to education. But there is a zeal at the moment from people taking out their children from school. But my question is to you as a primary school teacher, what does that entail? And just to keep it short, what capacity does a parent have to homeschool their children, in your opinion, that child is really having their right to education?
I think there needs to be like a level of maths and English and reading, because we say English, I think we think a lot about writing, but reading and writing come together, and maths that needs to be there, because otherwise you're going to limit your child's opportunities in the future, because as we also know, homeschooling is not forever. If you decide that it's not working, you might send your child back to school. Now, if you send them back to school, have you put them at a disadvantage because you've left certain things out? I'm all for following the child's interest, but 24/7, I think is dangerous because child's interest can change just like this. And now they've mastered nothing. The good thing about school is that there's a consistency. Every year group they're in, they'll be taught maths, they'll be taught English, they'll do some form of art, science, PE, whatever. So there's progression, able. If you're just at home following your child's interests, okay, this week their interest might be, or this year their interest might be art, next year their interest is basketball, and then it's science. So they've done 1 year of each thing.
Yeah, but they went to the science museum, then they went to see the NBA.
Yeah, and then they've mastered nothing essentially, and then you might get to an age where it's like, oh my goodness, my child has nothing secured because we were just trying a bit of everything.
And it will come out in presentation and behaviour.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
the thing.
And that chaos. So yeah, I think there needs to be structure. If you're going to home educate, there has to be a level of structure to it.
And I think it's more of a responsibility on you because now the state are now saying you're fully responsible now and handle that. And I think as well, what some people take for granted is actually school is a safe space for a lot of children. Even children where don't have the most dangerous homes, school is a safe space for them. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I've seen a lot of children who, if they were to be at home, it would be dangerous. They wouldn't function properly. So they need school. Yeah, and
so you would say homeschooling consistency, English and maths.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Structures that should be structured, and there should be some element of formal. Yeah, I think you need to also look at your child as well, because some parents take their children out and then their child is refusing to do work, and then there's that opinion from parents that like, oh, it's because they've got trauma from school, so they don't now they don't want to do work.
You may not be
they don't view you as a teacher. Yeah, that's the thing.
You're not holding. It's not a holding space for them.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas in school there was that structure, that expectation. At home it's kind of like, oh, we can do whatever. It works amazingly, and a lot of children actually make swift progress when they're home educated. But you know, as now we're seeing a lot more on social media, parents are now feeling like, oh, I can just do it because everybody else is doing it. And then I've found parents taking their children out and now they're online asking, what shall I do? But so that plan should have been in place.
It wasn't intentional, they didn't prepare.
That plan should have been in place beforehand.
Very interesting. Well, as we know, there's some laws that are coming out to govern a register. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this home education now looks like for this state. Yeah. And the demographic of people who will feel like it benefits their children. But thank you so much. I think this has been so informative. Thank you so much. Where can the viewers find you? I really want them to find you because your TikTok and Instagram is
thank you so much. Great. Thanks for having me as well. It's been a great conversation. But at Home Learning Haven on all of my social networks, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok.
So what's next? A workshop?
I will be doing. I do host workshops actually for parents.
Yes, you had one last week.
Empowering, so I host workshops empowering parents. Again, my most recent one was supporting parents to teach their children how to read. Because again, you can bring in a tutor to do it. But then, okay, now they've secured their phonics. Are you going to keep this tutor to develop their comprehension and their for the rest of their life? Whereas if you learn how to do it, you can do it yourself. So my workshops are not about. They're not for the child, and they're not about me telling you what to do. They are about me giving you the tools and strategies. Wow. So that's what I do.
Sign up. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. Hello, welcome to the Parent Advice Hub. My name is Lisa Ogbede. Please do subscribe and follow us on Instagram at the Parent Advice Hub. You can also check us out online at www.theparentadvicehub.com. Thank you.